All right, welcome to another deep dive.
Excited to be here.
Today we've got something pretty interesting to dig into. Someone sent us this, well, it's called Living Life 241217.pdf. Sounds kind of technical, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually a personal reflection, and it's all about this passage from the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 17, verses 7 through 18.
Revelation, always a fascinating one.
Yeah, it's definitely got some intense imagery in there. A woman riding a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns.
Right. That's just the beginning. It's packed with those vivid, almost dreamlike descriptions. It's what makes Revelation so captivating, so open to interpretation.
Exactly. And this author, they really dive into interpreting those symbols. Before we get into their take, though, can you maybe give us a little background on Revelation for those who, might not be so familiar with it?
Sure. So Revelation is the last book of the New Testament, and it's unique. It's what's called apocalyptic literature.
Apocalyptic literature. So, like, end of the world stuff.
In a way, yes. It's about revealing hidden truths, unveiling divine mysteries, often about the future. But it does it through this highly symbolic language, kind of like trying to describe a dream.
I see. So we shouldn't take it literally.
Not exactly. Think of it more like a vision, a symbolic representation of spiritual realities and future events. It's meant to be interpreted, and throughout history, there's been a lot of debate over just how to do that.
Okay, that makes sense. So in this chapter 17, what's the author really focusing on?
Well, they're really trying to unpack those wild symbols you mentioned, the woman, the beast, the heads, the horns. They see it as this cosmic battle playing out, good versus evil, with the prostitute and the beast representing, well, an evil alliance trying to undermine Jesus and his followers.
Whoa, an evil alliance. That sounds pretty intense. Why do they think that? Like, what in the text makes them say that?
Okay, so if we look at the reflection section, they point to the way the prostitute is described. Dressed in purple and scarlet, covered in gold and jewels. They see that as representing, well, a system that values wealth and luxury, worldly power, above all else.
I can see that. It's kind of like those temptations we all face, right? Chasing after material things, status.
Exactly. And then there's the beast she's riding, this terrifying creature with 7 heads and 10 horns. The author connects that to a powerful force, a force that's opposed to God and tries to control everything.
So it's like if the prostitute is the temptation, the beast is the source of it, the power behind it all.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They see them working together, the prostitute and the beast. You have the allure of worldly things, and then you have this oppressive power trying to keep people trapped in that system.
Wow. Now those 7 heads and 10 horns, those got to mean something, right?
Oh, definitely. The author sees those as symbols of immense power and influence. Think about kingdoms, empires, ideologies, anything that tries to dominate and control.
So not necessarily specific people, but more like systems or structures of power.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The author highlights how even though these forces, these beasts and prostitutes, seem so powerful, they're ultimately temporary. Revelation talks about their destruction, about God's reign being eternal.
That's a powerful message, especially when we see so much conflict and suffering in the world today. It gives you hope that things will eventually change, that good will win in the end.
It's a key takeaway from Revelation, this message of hope amidst chaos. And for the author, it's a reminder that even when facing challenges or opposition, faith can be a source of strength.
Now, I noticed the author specifically mentions 10 kings in their reflection. They seem to believe these kings symbolize nations that unite under the beast's authority. What do you make of that?
It's a pretty common interpretation, actually, seeing those 10 kings as representing those worldly powers, governments, nations that side with this oppressive force. They essentially join the wrong side of this cosmic battle.
So it's like you have to choose, right? Between following your faith and getting caught up in the pursuit of power or worldly gain.
You could definitely see it that way. And the author really emphasizes that those who choose the beast, they're doomed to fail. They even quote Revelation saying their war against the Lamb, against Jesus, is destined to be lost.
That really makes you think, what kind of beasts or kings are out there today? Like what systems or ideologies might be trying to, pull us away from our values or beliefs in the modern world?
That's a great question, and one we can definitely explore further in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll delve into the historical and contemporary context and see if we can identify any parallels to the beast and the prostitute in our own world.
I'm really looking forward to that. But before we move on, I want to touch on something else the author mentions: the importance of standing firm in your faith, even when facing opposition.
Oh, yeah. That's a crucial theme throughout Revelation, the idea of perseverance, of trusting that God is ultimately in control.
The author seems to find a lot of hope and assurance in that idea, especially when talking about Jesus' ultimate victory, reigning as King of Kings forever.
Absolutely. It's about remembering that even if evil seems powerful in the moment, it's fleeting. True power and victory belong to God, and that's a message that has resonated with believers for centuries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've got this personal reflection on Revelation 17.7 to 18, which is, all about a woman riding a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns.
Right. And the author's interpretation of those symbols as this evil alliance opposed to God. The prostitute symbolizing the allure of worldly things, and the beast being the power behind those temptations.
Exactly. And even though these forces seem so powerful, the author finds hope in knowing that they're ultimately temporary. They emphasize the importance of standing firm in our faith, even when facing opposition, and trusting in God's eternal reign.
And we've only just begun to scratch the surface. In Part 2, we'll delve into the historical and contemporary figures or systems that might be represented by the prostitute and the beast. We'll also explore the concept of spiritual warfare a little deeper.
So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with even more insights from this fascinating deep dive into Revelation 17. Welcome back to our deep dive into this personal reflection on Revelation 17. Last time, we were talking about the author's interpretation of the prostitute and the beast as this powerful force working against, Jesus and his followers. And, it got me thinking, what do you think, who or what could those symbols actually represent in the real world?
Well, that's a question that has puzzled people for centuries, hasn't it? And it's important to remember that Revelation, it speaks in the symbolic language. It's not necessarily about pinpointing specific individuals or organizations.
Right.
It's more about recognizing patterns of behavior, the underlying spiritual forces at play.
Okay, so it's not about pointing fingers, but more about understanding the nature of spiritual opposition.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Throughout history, there have always been empires, ideologies, even institutions that have sought to suppress or oppose those who follow Christ.
It's like, for example, the Roman Empire during the early days of Christianity.
Yeah, classic example. The Roman Empire, with its persecution of Christians, it's often brought up as a possible parallel to the beast in Revelation. But it doesn't have to be limited to just empires. It could also be, ideologies that promote things like self-indulgence, materialism, the pursuit of power at the expense of others.
So like something like unchecked consumerism. Or maybe those authoritarian regimes that try to silence dissent.
Those are certainly possibilities. The key is to look for those characteristics, that align with the description of the beast and the prostitute in Revelation. Those systems that thrive on deception, control, or the worship of false idols. Those things that ultimately pull people away from their faith.
Yeah, that's pretty sobering when you think about how relevant those themes still are today. Now, the author also talks a lot about this idea of spiritual warfare, which I gotta say, it sounds kind of intimidating. What exactly does that mean? Is it like, are we talking about like battling demons with swords and shields here?
Not quite. I mean, Revelation uses a lot of vivid imagery, right? But we don't always have to take it literally. Spiritual warfare is more about this constant battle between good and evil.
Okay.
That's happening, well, not just in the world around us, but also within ourselves.
So it's more of an internal struggle, like wrestling with temptation or doubt.
That's definitely a big part of it. Recognizing those forces that try to, undermine our faith, tempt us to stray from our values.
Yeah.
The things that create chaos and suffering in our lives.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But how do we actually fight in this spiritual war? Do we need to, wear garlic and carry holy water around or something?
No garlic or holy water required. It's not about, superstitious rituals or anything like that. It's about strengthening our faith, resisting those temptations, relying on, God's power to overcome those negative influences in our lives.
That makes sense. But what does that look like practically? How can we actually fight these battles in our everyday lives?
Well, it can take many forms. It might be choosing kindness and compassion, even when others are unkind to us. It could be standing up for what you believe in, even when it's unpopular or challenging. Or it could be finding ways to serve others and bring light into, what can sometimes feel like a dark world.
So it's about making choices that align with our faith, even when it's difficult. It's about actively choosing good over evil.
Exactly. We're not passive bystanders in this spiritual battle. We have a role to play, and our choices, well, they really do matter.
And I think that's where the author's focus on God's sovereignty comes in, right? It's that reminder that we're not alone in this fight, that
Yes.
there's this higher power working for good no matter what.
Absolutely. For all the intense imagery in Revelation, it ultimately offers a message of hope and victory. It reminds us that no matter how powerful evil might seem in the moment, God is in control, and good will triumph in the end.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the author's point about Jesus being the ultimate King of Kings, reigning forever. It's just this powerful reminder that despite the chaos and the suffering we see in the world, there's a higher purpose at work.
That's the heart of the message. And it's a message that has given people strength and hope for centuries. It's a reminder that our lives have meaning and purpose, that we can choose to be agents of light and hope even amidst the darkness.
I think what I find really striking about this reflection is how the author connects these grand, like cosmic ideas to their own personal struggles.
Mhm.
It makes it all feel so much more real and relatable.
It's a great example of how Revelation, despite being this ancient text, can still speak to us today. It's not just some abstract theological concept. It's a story about the struggle between good and evil that plays out in our own lives,
Right.
in our own hearts, every single day.
Yeah, it really makes you realize those choices we make, the way we respond to challenges, the way we treat others. It all plays a part in this ongoing spiritual battle.
That's right. We all have a role to play, and our actions have consequences in this larger struggle.
Now, before we wrap up part 2 of this deep dive, I wanted to touch on something we mentioned earlier. The author's focus on those 10 kings uniting under the beast's authority.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder, are there any modern day parallels to those kings? Like, what kinds of systems or ideologies might be trying to pull people away from their faith today?
Ooh, that's a question worth pondering. And it's one that we can explore further in part 3 of our deep dive. We'll delve deeper into the historical context of Revelation 17 and see if we can identify any potential connections to our own time.
I can't wait to uncover those connections, but for now, we'll have to leave our listeners with that cliffhanger.
Uh-huh. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of this fascinating personal reflection on Revelation 17. In the meantime, why not take some time to think about what those 10 kings might represent in our own world?
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into this personal reflection on Revelation 17. We've been through a lot: the symbolism of the prostitute and the beast, the idea of spiritual warfare, you know. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around how this passage fits into the whole book of Revelation. I mean, it's a pretty complex book.
Yeah, Revelation is definitely known for its vivid imagery, its symbolism. It can be a bit overwhelming, honestly. But there is a narrative there, a story that runs through the whole book. It's about the struggle between good and evil, about judgment, and ultimately about God's triumph.
So where does this chapter 17 fit in with this whole, fall of Babylon thing?
Chapter 17. It's kind of a pivotal moment. It foreshadows the downfall of all those powers that oppose God. Those who align themselves with the beast, with the temptations of the prostitute. All those systems and ideologies that prioritize, worldly gain and power over faith.
Right, like those 10 kings that unite under the beast's authority.
Exactly. And their downfall in chapter 17, it's kind of a warning, I guess, a reminder that worldly power, it's fleeting. True power rests with God.
Makes sense. It's like a glimpse of the final victory that's coming later in the book. But I'm curious, how have other people, like throughout history, interpreted this passage? Any particularly interesting or controversial viewpoints?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Revelation has been a source of, fascination and debate for centuries. You have some interpretations that focus on a very literal fulfillment of the prophecies, trying to pinpoint exact historical events or figures.
With like trying to identify the Antichrist.
Yeah,
Or predict the exact date of the end of the world.
precisely.
Yeah.
And those can be, they can be intriguing for sure. But it's important to remember that Revelation, it's primarily speaking in symbolic language. It's more about conveying spiritual truths,
Right.
encouraging faithfulness in the face of opposition, not so much providing a literal roadmap of future events.
Okay. So are there other interpretations that focus more on the symbolic meaning then?
Absolutely. Some see Revelation 17 as this allegory for the struggle between good and evil that happens, within each individual heart. We all have those inner battles, those temptations to choose selfishness or greed or power over love, compassion, faith.
That's really interesting. So the beast could represent like our own base desires, and the prostitute could be those alluring temptations that try to pull us away from what we know is right.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the battle between good and evil, it's not just this, cosmic event out there somewhere. It's something we experience every day in our own lives, and the choices we make and the values we embrace.
It's a lot more personal that way, isn't it? It also ties back to what the author was saying about personal reflection and the importance of making those choices that align with our faith, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. And regardless of which interpretation resonates with you,
Yeah.
Revelation 17 ultimately serves as this powerful reminder. God is sovereign. Evil will not prevail. And those who remain faithful, they will ultimately share in God's victory.
Wow, that's really inspiring. It's amazing how much we've unpacked from just this one personal reflection on Revelation 17.
It really shows how Scripture, even ancient texts like Revelation, they can still speak to us today across time and cultures.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a fascinating deep dive into this passage, exploring the symbolism, its historical and contemporary relevance, the different ways it can be interpreted.
I hope this encourages you to revisit Revelation or even other parts of the Bible, with fresh eyes and an open heart.
A big thank you to our expert for sharing their insights with us today.
And thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
Until next time, keep those minds deep diving.